Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. I was just, studying for the SAT. It's coming up soon, so, I want to try and get a good score. You're taking the SAT soon too? You want some study advice? I don't know, I'm kind of busy, studying for the SAT myself. You should probably go ask somebody else. Nah, I'm just kidding. I got you covered. I'll help you out with your studying. I'll show you everything I know about the SAT. Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy, back at it again with another Minecraft video, and today we're going to be talking about the SAT. So I've been getting a lot of comments asking me to make a video on how I studied for the SAT, so here's the video. But if this is your first time on the channel, hi, my name's Lordrick, currently a senior in high school, but this fall I will be attending Stanford University as a freshman. I make a lot of videos about high school and college related things, so if that's something that would interest you, please feel free to subscribe. Over 95% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, so if you'd like to help me out by leaving a like and subscribing, please feel free to do so. So standardized testing has been an integral part of the college application process for a number of years, but given the current situation of the world, that is starting to change. So a number of high-ranking schools, even some Ivy League schools, have announced that they will be going test optional for the upcoming application cycle. And that's to accommodate for all the students who can't take the SAT or the ACT between now and the time that applications are due. But even with that said, there are a number of schools that haven't announced that they will be going test optional, and it's unclear if they will ever be going test optional. And for the schools that have chosen to go test optional, it's unclear if they will continue to be test optional in future years. So in any case, standardized testing isn't officially gone for good yet, so I figured I'd make a video on how I prepared for my standardized tests, in hopes of helping you guys who plan to take the test in the future. I also want to preface by saying that the SAT and standardized testing as a whole isn't the most important part of your application. I'd say that standardized test scores are probably the least important part of your application. As I've said in my previous videos, the numbers of your application set the bar that you have to overcome to get into a school, but they're never going to be the thing that get you into a school. So having a higher SAT score can definitely help you, but having a lower SAT score isn't going to keep you out of a school. Because again, it's going to be the more subjective parts of your application that really count. Because those are the things that are going to separate you from all the other applicants. Between an applicant with a 1600 on the SAT and no extracurriculars, and an applicant with a 1300 and super amazing extracurriculars, admissions officers are probably going to want to take that 1300 over that 1600. So while studying for a better score can definitely help you, after a certain point, it just becomes an arbitrary number that you don't really need to focus too much on. The numbers of your application are the foundations, and you just need to build on top of them with everything else. So I'll start by giving a little bit of background on my experience with standardized testing so that I can, build that ethos. So I took the SAT a total of 3 times. The first attempt I got a 1470, then a 1490, and on my last attempt I got a 1570. So if you look at my scores, you'll notice that I had a pretty big jump between my second and third attempts. From my first attempt to my second attempt, I went up by 20 points, but between my second and third attempts, I went up 80 points. 80 points. And the reason for that is the first 2 attempts, I didn't really study, but on the third attempt, I did study, which is why my score went up by a lot. So when I was preparing for the SAT, I only used study books. I know that there are SAT prep classes that you can take, but those are kind of expensive. I also know that Khan Academy has a lot of really good resources on helping you prepare for the SAT, but personally, I don't really do too well with online studying, so I went with the traditional route and got a book. So as you guys can see, this is the official SAT study guide from College Board. I know that there are a lot of different other companies that also sell similar SAT study guides, like the Princeton Review and Barron's, but I went with the College Board one because I figured that since College Board is the one that's making the SAT, so their study guide is probably going to be the better one. But I don't have any experience with the other brands, so I might be a little bit biased. And I just want to say that you don't need to use the same exact study methods that I did. If you want to take SAT prep classes or use Khan Academy, then feel free to do so. And if you want to use different SAT prep books like Barron's or Princeton Review, then go for it. I'm not here to stop you. I'm just here to share my experiences and my perspective with preparing for the SAT. So just take everything I say with a grain of salt, because what worked for me may not work for you. Because at the end of the day, the person that's going to be taking the SAT is you. So you should find what method works best for you and stick with it. So when it comes to standardized testing as a whole, whether you're taking the SAT or the ACT, there's no way for them to actually see how well you know stuff. All they can see is whether or not you get questions right. So that means you don't actually need to know stuff in order to get good scores on the SAT. You just have to understand how to answer the specific kinds of questions that they ask. Because in my experience, the SAT is largely about pattern recognition. So if you can recognize those patterns and you know how to answer questions that fit those patterns, then you'll be golden. The thing I like about College Board's SAT prep book is that for the first section of it, they go over how to answer all the different kinds of questions, and they break down how to answer every type of question that would appear on the SAT. So for the first section of the SAT book, they basically just teach you how to take the SAT. And I think it was helpful for me to an extent, but a lot of what it explained was stuff that I already knew. So the thing that was more helpful to me was the practice test that they had at the end of the book. So I'm not sure how the prep books from the other brands work, but for the College Board one, they have 8 practice tests that you can take, and those practice tests are essentially full SATs. So they have a complete evidence-based reading and writing section, and they also have a complete math section with and without calculator. And they also have the SAT essay that you can practice with. So I think out of all the different ways of studying, the most helpful thing for me was actually taking practice tests, because it's one thing to learn how to take the test, but I think it's even better to actually take a test, because the kinds of questions the SAT asks are very specific to the SAT. Because just by taking these practice tests, I was really able to get into the mindset of how the SAT worked, which I think really worked well for me in the long run. So when I was studying for the SAT for the 3rd time, I ordered this book off Amazon, but it took a couple weeks to actually get to my house. So by the time I actually had this book in my hands, I only had a week left before the SAT. So obviously 1 week is not a lot of time to study for the SAT. I know that a lot of people spend many weeks and even months preparing for the SAT, but I didn't have that much time. So I just had to make do with what I had. Even though I had a very limited amount of time, I made a schedule for studying so that I could best make use of my time. And I think scheduling how you study for the SAT is going to be really helpful, because it helps keep you organized and on track, since you'll have clear and distinct goals as you're studying. So what I did is, for the first 6 days, I just went through that beginning section of the book where it taught me how to answer the different kinds of questions that the SAT asked. And at the end of that 6th day, I took my first practice test. So in each section, I got several questions wrong, but when I graded myself using the answer key and the conversion table that's actually already in here, I came away with a 1500, which was already better than the 1490 I had on my previous SAT. And on my last day of studying, I took a couple more practice tests, and the best score that I came away with was a 1540, which was a score that I was really happy with. And so the next day I went and took my SAT, and I felt really confident about it. And a number of weeks later, I got my score back, which I was really happy with. And as one final piece of advice, people will generally say that cramming for tests the night before isn't a good idea. And I would agree with those people in most cases. But when it comes to the SAT, I would say that cramming is completely fine, because the goal of the SAT is just to get a good score. So if you can cram study the night before and then do well on the test the next morning, even if you forget everything right when you walk out the door, as long as you can get a good score, that's all that matters. In my opinion, the SAT and standardized testing as a whole isn't really about learning stuff, it's about getting good scores. Because again, the SAT doesn't measure how well you know stuff. It only measures how well you can take the test. And that was everything I had on the SAT. And I hope it was helpful for you guys, at least a little bit. Once again, this video is part of an ongoing series where I talk about the college application process and break down my experiences with it to share with you guys. So if there are any other things related to applying to college that you guys want me to talk about, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to help you guys out. So if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like and comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe for some more great content. That's all for today, folks, so I'll see you next time. Bye!